Matter of Delicacy, Part 4. Her task was simple enough. She was to spend her nights pleasing Durle-Mok, and during the day she would visit a shop near the Temple of Zath to see if Conan had discovered the items he was seeking. It had sounded a task with low risk when Jadul Rajam had explained it to her. Now, as she looked upon the columns that held up the temple's Piedmont, Toria began to doubt. Doubt and her were very old friends. Walking the streets and hawking her body for coin had given her a keen judgment of character. She knew that Rajam would keep his word, so long as it was not too costly. She also knew that Conan would not abandon her. The barbarian had given her his word, and would keep it to death. I could think of less pleasant ways to spend my nights, she thought, and steeling her resolve, she presented herself to the guards. I have come to present myself as a servant, she told the guard. She presented him with a handbill that announced the temple was looking for women willing to bear children. The guard looked Tory up and down, and with a lustful leer he pointed her inside the temple. She entered the temple through the door he guarded. Beyond him was the sanctuary of the temple, and the 20-foot-tall effigy of Zath. Before it, supplicants prayed, and dancing girls in diaphanous robes spun and pirouetted to the pleasure of the unseen god. As Tory watched them, her eyes were drawn to the shadows. Was it her imagination, or did they shimmy in unnatural ways? She watched in fascination, and she felt a presence in the air, much like walking into a room that was once filled with the lotus smokers, and now lingered with the scent. So the presence of dread Zath filled the temple. Her gaze traveled up to the effigy, and she stared into its metal eyes. A priest touched her elbow. She blinked, unsure of how long she had stood there. The dancing troupe had switched out their members. She must have been staring at the statue for some time. He is lovely, isn't he? The priest asked. Every Zamran woman wishes he blessed them with a child. Of course, Tori said as one would when waking from a dream. The priest accompanied her to an examination room where doctors poked and prodded her with a series of other women. Those that showed any sign of disease or infirmity were dismissed. Finally, only 4 women remained. Now the priest that examined them began to debate which of the girls was the most lovely. Tori presented herself to one of them, and whispered secrets she knew about pleasing men into his ear. This, combined with the marks on her flesh that proved she had given birth in the past, granted her the victory. The other women filed out of the room after collecting their clothes. Tori ignored the hateful glares she received from them. She doubted they would have the mettle to earn her skills, or survive the events that had caused her to become a whore. She was about to don her clothing when she was stopped. The priest presented her with a fine dress, and the temple's dancing girls oiled her hair. When she was considered presentable, a dancing girl led her up the stairs to the floors above. Tori had heard of the daring raid that had happened upon these stairs. Tales of the sword fight that had broken out in the temple had surely been inflated. Yet now, walking upon these stones, she could well believe that Conan had single-handedly defeated the temple's garrison. Tori was escorted to a chamber which was guarded by 2 priests. The priests were eerily silent and did not look at her. Their swords rested point first upon the floor, and their hands were folded together on top of the pommels. They could have been mistaken for statues had their complexion been just a shade lighter. The doors of the chamber were opened, and inside the room Tori could see the candles and oil lamps softly lighting the room. She heard voices arguing behind the door. The servant motioned her to enter, and she stepped into the room. The doors were closed behind her. The door was closed behind her, and she peered about for Durle-Mok. Durle-Mok reclined upon a couch. Standing near him was a strange woman. Tori had never seen the like of her, nor could she identify from which people the woman hailed. As Tori regarded her, the stranger's gaze met hers. Tori nearly ran from the room. The woman did not possess human eyes, but instead a pair of green, snake-like orbs. Worse, the creature seemed pleased by Tori's discomfort. We risk much, should anyone discover, said a priest that was arguing with Mok. Enough, Mok cried. We have set our course. We cannot rely upon the nobles until we know how many of their number are involved in the plot. nor can we appeal to the zeal of the masses who allowed that demon-worshipper Yara to erect his tower. Sorcery plagues our beloved Zamora, brother. We must use all tools that we can against it, and to do that, we must understand it. The priest that Durley Mock was rebuffing glanced towards the strange woman at Mock's side. The priest snarled a question. And is she merely a tool to be used against her own kind? How can you be so foolish as to trust her? Sorcerers are no kin of mine. I was conceived and bound against my will. I have a vested interest in being sure that men that can command me about with some muttered words and ceremonies are eradicated. That you can trust, Brother Yon, the woman said without bothering to look at the priest. Her attention was solely for Torre. The other brothers will not have it, Yon said. Then do not tell them, Durley Mock said. I can proclaim it in order from Zath if you like. You use the god's name so casually, Yon warned. Does Zath speak to thee? Durley Mock asked. You already, tried Yon. Does Dread Zath speak to thee? Durley Mock asked again. No, Yon said. And have you seen proof that Dread Zath speaks with me? Mock asked. Yes, but some will say that was in the past only. Some, meeting your servant, will say that you have strayed from the path, Brother Yon challenged. There are always doubters, Brother Yon. Are you one? Mock asked. No, Yon said. Durley Mock then presented the man one of his ringed hands. Brother Yon kissed the rings of the priest's hand, then he turned and left the room. The priest passed by Torre and hissed his disapproval under his breath. And horse as well, our great purifier indeed, he hissed. The strange woman walked in front of Mock and prostrated herself on the floor before him. Command me, great Durley Mock, she said. Go back to your master, and be sure that he is at his task. Do not allow him to perform any other rites, and allow none to see him at his work and live. I must have proof of the guilty, and I must know where they will next gather, Mock said to her. Now be on your way. The woman rose from the floor, and as she passed by Torre, her serpentine gaze roamed Torre's body. Torre had seen this kind of appreciation before, but normally only from men. She shuddered. With the demonkin's departure, Torre returned her attention to Durley Mock. She found him to be very regal. Power rested on some men with wear and care, but upon Mock's shoulders the responsibilities of his position seemed to complement him. Torre could also see that in his youth he must have been very fetching, and even now in his approaching dotage he was handsome. She knelt before Durley Mock and waited. He regarded the woman with a bored expression upon his face. His dark eyes glanced over her form before he motioned for her to come near. Torre approached, and when she was arm's length away, the priest now met Torre's gaze. He still seemed disinterested in her. They tell me you have some feature that makes you special, yet I do not see it. To me you appear to be nothing more than another sad and lowly whore, Durley Mock stated. I was told you were looking for a servant that was willing to bear children. I am willing, Torre said. Why? Durley asked. I lost my husband and my first child. They were murdered. Men broke into our home, foreigners, and my husband tried to stop them. They just kept stabbing. Torre hid her face in her hands, as she shed real tears from the memory. The men had not stopped at stabbing her husband to death. They had turned their knives against her daughter after they were done using her in cruel and unspeakable ways. She felt Durley Mock's hands upon her own. He gently guided her hands away from her face. His expression was now one of sympathy. Torre found herself wanting the sympathy there to be real. She sensed it might actually be so. What happened next? He asked. They demanded I please them or they would kill us all. When I complied, they mocked me and called me a whore for trading away my body to save my daughter. Then they cut her throat, Tori said. What kind of foreigners were these men? Durlemok asked. Turanians, Tori said truthfully. Perhaps he was using some sorcerous art on her, or perhaps he simply had acquired an astute sense for seeking truth. When Durlemok looked at her, Tori could feel that there was something in his character other than ambition. True sympathy lurked beneath his hardened veneer. Guilt ran through her, and she had a momentary impulse to warn that Conan was scouring his vaults. She looked away to control herself, and Mok misread her guilty demeanor for originating and failing to save her family from harm. He stroked her cheek and gently drew her into an embrace. She rested her cheek against his bony shoulder and was surprised to find that there was true comfort in the arms of the priest. You turned to prostitution after they had abused you and made you believe that that was what you were destined to be. You poor woman, Durley said. Of course I shall take you into our service. Zath is there for all his loyal Zamarans. If it is above my station to ask this, forgive me. What was it you and the priest were arguing about? Tori asked. The presence of sorcery in our beloved city, Mok spat. It offends you, then? From the looks of your female servant, I was very afraid of her, Tori said. Have no fear of Yadrutpul. She spoke truthfully that she has no love of sorcerers. Yet because of her unique curse, we are in a position to greatly reduce the number of sorcerers in Zamara. Brother Yon argues with my methods, yet now we have no choice. Many are the nobles who, in their short-sighted bickering, have turned to the black arts to gain an edge on their competitors. To purify the land, Zath has demanded a sacrifice. Sadly, the sacrificial virgin was stolen from our temple by a troublesome Cimmerian and his allies. So now to free Zamara from sorcerers, I must rely upon sorcery and some discreetly paid knifemen. Why not simply turn the sorcerers into the king? Tori asked. She was now very frightened to be associated with this plot. Conan had already foiled Mok's plans once before. If Mok discovered that Tori was here to distract him, she had no doubt that she would be tortured to death. They have struck a pact and founded a cabal. I must take them all when I strike, lest they have time to cast some spell. Sadly, the king is not the kind of ruler to act carefully, and the queen is not the kind of ruler to command the respect of the army. No, we are on our own. I am my loyal silent ones. He stroked her hair and guided her to sit beside him. For many minutes she rested against the priest, and his attention was perfectly gentlemanly. Tori returned to the embrace and pretended that Mok was her husband returned to her. Will I be a wife to you then? She asked. The doctrines of Zath prevent his priests from marriage, lest there be arguments about succession to the priestly chair. You will be my concubine, and our children will become priests in the order. You will not want for food or shelter, and none shall ever abuse you ever again. Like Zath, I care for all my countrymen and women, Durlemok said, but there will be time enough for that. Tori kissed his collarbone. He paused, and she felt him intake a deep breath. She rose from resting her head on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. Thank you for caring about my comfort, she said, but I came here prepared for the evening. Once we have joined together, the contract of my concubinage will be official. Many are the men that have abused me and taken advantage of me. I need something I can hold on to other than words too lightly given and easily broken. Please, my lord, join with me and let me please you. No, child, Durlemok replied tenderly. 'Tis I that shall please you. With the strength of a much younger man, Mok picked Tori up from the couch and carried her to the bed. As he removed his robe, she was surprised to see that he had not the drooping flesh of the aged, but wiry muscle. Beneath his loincloth proof loomed that he was not affected by his advanced age in other common ways, and Tori removed her own gown to perform her duty.